welcome tonight to our event titled Son of Hamas. Beautiful crowd. Sunday night is usually traditionally in college a night spent when students cram their work in preparation for Monday morning class. Yet hundreds have shown up here tonight. Shows what an interesting topic, interesting guests we have here tonight. Much work goes into an event like any event, but specifically an event like this. I'd like to make a few thank yous. Firstly, thank you very much to SAF for funding the event, to the Student Activities Office with Tim Asher and Jess Clark. I'd like to thank the Police Department for their security, as well as Strike Force for their help. I'd also like to thank Susan O'Connor in the box office and Dale Simon, who runs the operations here at Kendall Hall. This event is sponsored by Chabad together with Hillel and AEPI. And we would like to thank all the members, starting with the president of Chabad, Avi Yehudi, and all the board members of Chabad, Ava Boxer and all the Hillel members, Carl Whitlock and all the AEPI members, who have put much effort into getting everyone here tonight, making this event happen. To make tonight truly special, we searched high and low for a guest interviewer who can help us get the most out of the presentation. And we are really excited to introduce to you someone who has his own radio show based out of New York. He's the president and founder of Talkline Communications, which is a radio TV network founded in 1981. He's interviewed celebrities and famous politicians around the world. And most importantly, he is with us here tonight. Please give a warm welcome to Zev Brenner. We're all intrigued by the fascinating story of Mosab Hassan Yousef, growing up as the son of one of the founding fathers of the internationally recognized Hamas terrorist organization. Mosab has since found asylum here in the United States, and is with us here tonight to share with us a detailed account of his life and a different perspective of the issues that face the Middle East. So please give a warm welcome to Mosab Hassan Yousef. Students will be able to ask questions throughout the presentation. To make it easier, you can text your message to Avi Yehudi. The number's right there. I'll read it out for those who can't. 732-742-8934. You can take any phones now and punch it in. At any time, we're going to have breaks throughout the interview where your questions will be asked on your behalf. So please enjoy the evening. Take it away.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here with you tonight. I feel like I'm back on the radio with the microphones held in my hands, and we'll share the microphone tonight. And as you heard Kiwi, and I thank Kiwi, and I thank Chabad and Hillel and API for not only having this event, but having me hosted with you on the radio. We have an excitement. We have people calling in and seeing live people asking questions, real live questions. We're excited tonight. And throughout the evening, we will take your questions interspersed with the interviews. Our guest I had interviewed about a year and a half ago, and as you heard Kiwi mention, he's former Hamas. His book is called Son of Hamas. He was born in Ramallah in the West Bank in 1978. His father, Sheikh Hassan Yousef, was a founding member and founding leader of Hamas, internationally recognized terrorist organization responsible for killing many in the West and in Israel. And he was an integral part of the movement. He was imprisoned several times by the Shin Bet, which is Israel's security services. He was convinced to become one of the operatives of the Shin Bet, and Mosab accepted that. And eventually he wanted to turn on the Israelis, be like a double agent, but he ended up being a triple agent by not going back on the Israelis, but actually going back on Hamas. The reason why he did so, we'll find out tonight what made him decide to cooperate with the Israelis. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. And after a chance with the British encounter, the British tourists, he actually came more to the Israeli side. We'll find out what happened, and his book, as I mentioned, is called Son of Hamas. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
Thank you.
A warm round of applause.
that you hold two mics.
If you want to hold two mics, that's fine. We'll hear it in stereo.
Thank you for having me here. It's a privilege.
Now, you are courageous, you're bold, you're speaking out. Aren't you afraid to be in public, including in a place like this? Aren't you afraid that somebody is going to go after you and do some dastardly things to you?
Well, I don't feel this way. I think, people have the right to think for themselves. And sometimes to challenge the public, challenge the society as a new generation of what we believe. And I don't think that we should be afraid. Free people are not afraid. Sometimes it's dangerous what we have to say. It's not acceptable.
But Hamas is not happy what you're doing, so you're not afraid that they're going to go after you?
Well, thankfully, Hamas is not an official party here in the United States of America.
But they have operatives here in this country too. We know that.
It's a terrorist organization, and here in the United States of America, I think all of us have to demonstrate our freedom without being afraid of anything. And I think we should not give terrorists the chance to hijack our freedoms because of their intimidation, because they could do something. This is not how we should act in this country. We have to live free, to think free, and this is the source of our strength, I believe.
Terrific. Kudos to you for that. So let's go to the beginning. Here you are. You're in Ramallah. You're growing up. It's in the 1970s. Your father is a founding member of Hamas. What was it like growing up in a household with the founder of Hamas? What did you think about Jews, about Israelis? What did you learn?
Well, it would be really hard to squeeze, that reality in a few words tonight. But Muslims, Arabs, Palestinians, they have their own world. It's different than this world. Are they different than us? I don't think so. The human condition is a human condition. But they live a different experience, a different life. Their paradigms are totally different than ours. And with that said, please, I may say something that could be considered offending to the Muslim people, but it's not. This is not my intention by any chance. I believe that Muslims are wonderful people. Actually, they are my family, and I still consider them my family. And please, if there is like any Arabs or Muslims among you guys, please do open up with them and build bridges of understanding, because their reality could be totally different than yours. Growing up in that environment as a Palestinian child, I had no idea what I was doing. I had to believe in the things that my parents told me, the society forced me to believe. When I say forced, there are invisible forces in every society. Those forces, like the force of shame, of guilt, of fear, those things exist in that culture. And to grow up for a conservative Muslim family, the society had expectations from us. I had to behave in a certain way. I was under lots of pressure because everybody was expecting from me to be the next leader.
You were being groomed to be the leader of Hamas.
Well, this is very hard to say, but this is where I was heading, I think.
So I'm trying to pinpoint. What did you think about Jews, about Israelis? What were you taught about the Jews growing up?
Let me tell you the story. When I was 10 years old, Israeli soldiers came into our house from the back door. And they asked my father to get ready because they wanted to take him with them. And the officer said, we're taking him only for 5 minutes. Now I'm talking about, Israeli soldiers, special forces coming into our house. I had no idea about my father's business at that time, that he was one of the founders of Hamas organization. I did not know the real nature of my father's organization. But now as a child, I asked that officer, where are you taking him and for how long? He said, we're taking him for 5 minutes and we will return him. The special forces were thinking just to give an answer that makes me comfortable and makes my family comfortable in order to just get out of that territory because they were behind the enemy lines.
and they did not want to endanger themselves. But for me as a child, I went outside and I waited 5 minutes, 10 minutes. My father came back a year and a half after and had to witness, all the pain that my family and especially my mother had to go through because of that. Now, how can you try to step in the shoes of that child. Imagine yourself growing up in that environment. You don't understand your father's business, and some troops came and took him. How would you feel about it? So it's not only about the educational system. I had personal, political, national, and most importantly, ideological reasons to hate the state of Israel. And you grow up believing in that reality. Is that true? Was Israel truly my enemy? No, it was not. But in my reality, at that time, it was my enemy.
So did you hate Jews growing up?
Definitely. I hated Jews, as I said again, for many reasons.
When did you discover that your father was the founder of Hamas?
That was a top secret. Actually, till today, it's not published to public that he's one of the 7 founders of the movement. I knew this when I was in prison, when I met another founder of the movement who told me about this fact, and after that I asked my father, and he told me just not to tell anybody.
But were you encouraged to do any terrorist activity by your family, by your father? Because you were incarcerated by the Israeli authorities.
Right. Well, at the age of 17, I was ready to take revenge. I was still in high school, and I wanted to take revenge from the enemies of the society, of the God that I used to worship, Allah, who, by the way, did not like and does not like the Jewish people. I think he does not like non-Muslims, and I believe he does not like even Muslims who follow him. If you read in the Quran, it's very clear, it's very clear in the behavior of the Prophet of Islam, how much he hated the Jews. And that was the ideological dimension of that conflict, that the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is not only a political conflict, it's also an ideological and religious one. People rather not to talk about religion and ideology because it's complicated and it's considered, politically incorrect, but this is the reality of the situation. And what was the question again?
I want to know about your activities. You were arrested for terrorist activities by the Israeli authorities. So somehow, did your father tell you to do it? Did you do it on your own? I'm trying to get a handle on it.
No, actually my father did not want me to get involved in any of these activities. On my own, with friends from high school, we purchased guns, and we decided to go and shoot at some Israelis. And fortunately, I was arrested a couple of weeks after we purchased the guns, so we did not take anything in action.
By the way, did you have any encounter growing up? You were 17 years old. Did you ever meet any Jews? Did you have any encounters with them, or just when you saw those forces coming in to rescue father?
Exactly. There was no chance to meet any Israelis. I remember once in our village. Now imagine our country is like the Palestinian territories are within the Israeli borders. Now it's like little towns, but some of those towns have 500,000 population, like Hebron in the south. Now Palestinians kind of rule themselves. They take care of their daily life, taxes, all that by the Palestinian Authority, and we're living in that reality. In order to go to even, it's not that far. I would say maybe 20 minutes, you would be in an Israeli town. It looks completely different. You feel that you're in a different world. Yes, we're neighbors, but our cultures are different. Our religion is different. Our interest in life, the way people think there are completely different. So now going from here to there does not mean that you can learn about the other society. But I remember in our village, for example, my uncle used to work for a Jewish company in Israel. And he invited his boss and his partner and their families. So now my uncle called my father and he said, I need your help. Please bring your wife and come down to our village to help serve Jewish families who are coming, our hosts, or our guests, I mean. Now, I remember going with my father. Imagine my father at that time, in secret, he was establishing Hamas movement that is responsible for the death of thousands of Israelis. Now, because of social reasons, and at that time, the first Palestinian Intifada did not start yet, he came down to the village, and I remember him serving food for the Jewish families and loving on them and being respectful, and everything was perfect. Few months after, the first Palestinian Intifada started, my father was arrested, and Jewish families could not anymore come to our village or to our towns, and there was complete separation. So this just gives you an example of how sometimes, politics can take people much farther than they could imagine.
So here you are, 17 years old, arrested by Israeli authorities for having weapons. What happens next? You're put into prison, and let's take it from there.
I was arrested by the Israeli Defense Forces. I was taken to a very scary facility. On the way, I was beaten almost to death. Not because Israel beats the prisoners. Israel is a democracy. Israel respects human rights, and I can witness for this in many, many events as part of the Israeli intelligence community in the past. But still, those soldiers were very young, and they knew that I was a son of a top Hamas leader. So they were already planning to take revenge from all the bloodshed and all the pain that they had in their hearts. And they took advantage of that, which was illegal, which was against the Israeli law. But unfortunately, that was not good for me. I did not know the difference. And I got to this facility and was isolated away from my family. I did not see anybody for 3 months continuously. And I was mentally tortured during that time. Now, the Israeli intelligence is always, it's like the FBI here, it's called the Shin Bet or Shabak in Israel. It's very similar to the FBI in here. And what they do, they try most of the time to recruit people who are affiliated with terrorist organizations. It could be a son of a top Hamas leader, it could be a teacher at one of Hamas schools. They're always trying. So I was expected from the Israeli intelligence officers to ask me if I was willing to work for them. And I thought, if I say yes, it would be an opportunity to get out of jail, play a double agent kind of thing, fool them, and bring some information to Hamas, and maybe continue in my revenge journey. For that, when I was asked if I worked for the Israeli intelligence, I said yes, I agreed, and they were surprised. But then I was surprised when they told me we cannot release you now, because if we release you, your people are going to get suspicious about you. So we have to keep you in prison for cover. You have to spend your sentence, simply. And then I was transferred to prison in Megiddo, to the north, and I spent 16 months in Israeli prison.
So, agent, you want to get your revenge against the Israelis for what you perceive they did to your family. So what changed? Well, all of a sudden, you didn't become a double agent. You actually were working for the Shabak.
Yeah, at that time, I was not working for the Shabak.
But you were getting prepared. When you were going to be released, you were going to work for them.
Yeah, I was in prison. What happened, before we talk about my desire to work for the state of Israel. In prison, I witnessed brutal torture. This time was not from Hamas against Israel or from Israel against Hamas. That torture was from Hamas against Hamas people. My father's organization's security wing, it's called the Majd, were collecting intelligence who possibly get information for the Israeli intelligence. And in that process, they tortured hundreds of prisoners. Many of them were killed. Brutal torture. This is not just like to justify a move that I made later on. I'm telling you, it was a nightmare. Imagine yourself 16 months in that facility where Hamas had a very strong grip on prisoners' lives, and some of them were tortured in a way. For example, I know you're young and you can't handle, situations like this. They would put needles under their fingernails or burn plastic on their bodies. And you would hear people screaming all night long, but they're not loud because they stick a soap bar in their mouth and a towel, so the Israeli authorities cannot hear them screaming. And they did this to hundreds of prisoners in less than 3 years. Now, for me, in that situation, I never seen this face of my father's organization. Usually, I see my father, a forgiving, loving father. He's very humble. He's a very nice guy. And I thought everybody in his organization is the same as he was. Now, here I am in prison, face to face, for the first time, with the true nature of my father's organization. There was a problem. As the oldest son of my father, I had lots of privileges. I had very nice clothes, I had a very nice car, I had my own apartment. People respected me in the street. If I go downtown Ramallah, I have 100 people coming just to shake my hand. While I was very young still, I was protected by the Hamas guys, and I was like a prince. Now, what was very difficult for me in that situation, why would I question my father's business if I was profiting from it? And what if I discover that the real nature of my father's organization is a terrorist organization? Will I stand against it? Will I stand against my identity, against everything that I learned in life? That was the biggest challenge for myself.
Did they protect you in prison too? Did you have a special status because your father was a founder?
Actually, in prison, I had many privileges. In prison, I told the Hamas security people about my intention of playing the double agent against Israel. Believe or not, they were looking for people like myself, and they killed them, they tortured them. But in my case, they came to me and they said, listen, you don't share this story with anybody. Can you imagine the public reaction if they know that you have a connection with Israel? Because Hamas movement does not believe in negotiating with Israel, does not believe in peace. They only believe in one thing: building a Palestinian Islamic state on the rubble of the state of Israel. Israelis have to go somewhere else. They cannot even have 1 inch of that land. This is how Hamas thinks. So now, for the Palestinian public to know that the son of a top Hamas leader sitting down with the Israelis and discussing security, it doesn't matter what's the motive behind that, that would have been an embarrassment for the movement. So they asked me to bury the story forever. While in the meantime, they're killing our friends. And I can hear my friends screaming. So this is like another fact about the hypocrisy of my father's organization that I did not see living close to him.
When did you discover the ideology of Hamas, that they want to establish a Palestinian state in the rubble of Israel, killing Jews? When did you discover that? Because you said your father didn't discuss that in the house, so when did you learn what Hamas really stood for?
Well, at a very young age, and it all was justified. Hating Israel, trying to destroy Israel, is absolutely justified by that culture. It's not only that your father come to you and teach you something bad. It's about, you see lots of violence. For example, I'm living next to a graveyard where all the people who were shot in confrontations with the Israeli troops were buried just next door. So I had to witness every day at least 3 to 4 people, buried because they were shot by Israel. Now again, as a child at that time, it was very hard for me to understand, all the dynamics of politics and everything else. For me, I thought there was like good people and bad people, good guys and bad guys. The Israelis were definitely the bad guys, and I had to do everything possible to make them feel the pain that we were feeling. Now, growing up, I started to understand more of politics. I went to school. I had to read many books. I got into philosophy. I was open for new religions to study and go beyond the cultural, political, religious boundaries. And this is where, my paradigm started to shift, and I start to see a new perception. Does that make sense? So this is, how things start to change.
I guess we're going to take a break right now so we can get some of your questions, your thoughts, and you want to speak about what the Mosab has been doing up until now. We're going to leave you with a cliffhanger about what made him change. It's upcoming in a few minutes, but I think we have some questions first.
Yeah, a lot of questions.
Sure.
First question I received is, where do you see the peace process heading in the future?
Well, we need, to have more people who believe in peace first. To have a process. There cannot be a process, as long as we don't have enough people who praise peace in the Middle East. I believe on both sides there are amazing, Arabs and Muslims who believe in peace, and I hope that at some point they will have the courage to stand, for what's right.
Another question I received about 20 times was, were you taught as a child about the Holocaust, and if so, what were you taught?
Yeah, this is another problem. We were taught that the Holocaust was just a fable. It never existed. And we were taught that the Holocaust is only a Zionist propaganda to justify all the actions of Israel. And this is honestly the knowledge and the wisdom on the Palestinian streets. Holocaust is not being taught in universities and colleges there. And I hope at some point the Palestinians will start to realize how much persecution the Jewish nation had to go through, but instead of seeking revenge, they came to find life. And they established a state out of persecution. More than 6 million Jewish people were killed in the Holocaust. This did not make the Jews go out and take revenge from the entire world. And this is like the experience where I'm trying to communicate with my people that revenge, which was my path at some point, is not going to take us anywhere. It's only going to take us from bad to worse.
Another question I received was, why did you decide to leave Islam?
This is a good question. As we know, Islam is one of the biggest religions now. 1 out of 4 people on earth is a Muslim. This is a huge community, and we cannot ignore this fact. And for me, as a person who studied the Islamic law, I went to a Sharia school. I studied the Quran. I memorized huge portions of it. I understand the philosophy of Islam. I studied the classic Arabic, which is, the language of the Quran itself, to understand the meanings of the religion. I went to a secular school, but in the meantime, I went to a Sharia school because my father wanted me to have knowledge about the religion. When I came to the level to have some doubts about my own belief system, which was one of the hardest things. It's one of the hardest things to go against the script that the others wrote for you. That's very, very hard because you disappoint them. They might go against you. You might put yourself in danger. And this was, for me to criticize Islam. People think that I'm having fun saying that. Criticizing Islam is not an easy topic. And I know it's politically incorrect. And this is not our topic for tonight. But I believe that Islam has absolute control over people's lives in the Middle East. It's not like Christianity here in the United States or other religions in the United States, where we have the upper hand for the constitution, the civil constitution. In the Middle East, religion and religious authorities have the upper hand above the constitution. And this is where we have the problem. Now, for me, I know there is no way for progress or for liberation in the Middle East if we don't liberate people from the absolute control of religion and give them a civil constitution that will protect their religious freedoms from one hand, and on the other one, protect them from religion abuse. So with that said, I have a big problem with Islam. And I speak from a place of knowledge of the real nature of the religion, and I have a mission towards my people. I'm not here to make a statement against Islam, to create controversy, and this is how I live. No, I have a mission. I need to liberate my people, my family, my father, my sisters. You know, I want them to enjoy the freedom that I'm enjoying today. And this is why I criticize, challenge, and question Islam. Not for pleasure, but for a positive, hopefully, result.
You want to effectuate change.
Yes.
One more? All right, one more question that you also keep receiving. When was the last time you were in contact with your father, and are you still in contact with any members of your family?
The eve of publishing my book, Son of Hamas, I was disowned by my father publicly, which was something that I expected. I'm not sure that he disowned me from his heart, because we were very good friends. And it's not that only. During our work with the Israeli intelligence, which we're going to discuss in a bit, I saved his life. I saved many Palestinian lives. For that alone, I find it very hard for him just to disown me. We were very close friends. Intellectually, I mean, always we had arguments, and I mean, like in a positive way, intellectual arguments. And he knows, you know, that I had some dangerous ideas. So he saw somehow where I was heading. He knew that I had interest in Christianity, Judaism, and I was asking many questions about, you know, the state of Israel as a democracy, the only democracy in the region. So I'm sure that he was not very surprised. You know, maybe he was surprised about the part that I was working for the Israeli intelligence in secret against his organization. That part maybe, but for me intellectually, I think he understood where I was coming from. Unfortunately, he had no choice but to disown me, and I hope at some point, since then I did not talk to him. It has been like 3 years now.
Any member of the family, are you in contact with sisters, cousins, anybody?
I stayed in touch with my sister and brother for a while. They were in secret talking to me, and at some point, honestly, it's very dangerous for them.
Where are they living now?
They live in Ramallah, back in the Palestinian territories. If I keep in touch with them and the Palestinian Authority or Hamas organization knows about that, they will be persecuted. And I found, like, you know, I moved on in my life. They know exactly what I'm talking about. They can see this lecture maybe live, or they can see it on a video on YouTube at some point. So
They're keeping an eye on you.
I'm sure that they are. I'm sure.
Now back to the story. So here you are. You're in prison. You see Hamas violence against Hamas members. You're turned off. So let's take it from there. So what do you do next?
Now, again, like, you know, I'm in prison and spending now 16 months. As we said, you know, we discovered all the brutality of Hamas. Now, I got out of prison. I received a phone call, and the voice was familiar. It was the Israeli officer who came to recruit me in prison. So he said, "Can we meet?" I told him, "Well, first of all, thank you for sending me for a short period of time." They promised to send me only for a short period of time. And I ended up spending 16 months. Then thank you for telling me about the Hamas torture in prison, looking for people like me. At least you could have prepared me for a shock like this. He said, "Listen, we cannot discuss these matters over the phone. Can we meet?" And I agreed for the meeting. Now, when I say meeting, you might think that it was at Starbucks by the corner or at a restaurant. It was more of a kidnapping process. I promise you, it was very complicated. The chance that the distance between our meeting and where I live was maybe 20 to 25 minutes. It took us 5 hours to get to the meeting. because we had to change many cars, we had to manipulate a potential follower, trying to figure out what I was doing. So anyway, we had to do this for many years. At that first meeting, I learned that Hamas torture against those suspicious people in prison had actually nothing to do with the Israeli intelligence. None of them had a relationship with the Israeli intelligence. And I promise you, for the 10 years that I worked with the Israeli intelligence, that they never connected me with other agent, or let's say a spy, in the field. This is not how intelligence service work. Think about it. Hamas used to bring somebody, put lots of mental and physical pressure on them. They had no choice but to confess something. So always they gave false information about other agents or network of spies that work for the Israeli intelligence. Now Hamas goes and kidnaps the other names that they're mentioned by this guy, and they torture him as well. And they confess more names, and this is how they tortured many people. Now, if the Israeli intelligence did not connect me with any other agent, I was completely on my own in prison and outside of prison. And we had very complicated way to communicate with each other. And I never was introduced to any of the agents. This means that my father's organization is responsible for the death of many innocent people and destroying their families and their future. And that was a big red flag for me. That was not an easy thing, because I'm coming from a leading family. I'm thinking like a leader. I'm not thinking just like a soldier. And for me, this is not the organization that my father is telling me about. This is a mafia. This is a terrorist organization in that situation. And now I'm learning these facts, not from the media, not from my father himself. I'm learning these facts from my enemies, my worst enemies. What if my enemy is telling the truth? What if my enemy was credible more than my father, who I love? And this is, I start to become more curious to know the truth. And unfortunately, at that time, the only place that I could learn the truth was from my enemies. And this is how I started a journey with my enemy.
So, in the interest of time, you mentioned that you saved your father, you saved as many lives by your cooperation with the Israeli intelligence. Let's elaborate. Give us some examples of saving your father's life and saving other lives.
Father was hiding in a safe house for about 3 years during the second Palestinian Intifada. Most of his friends, like Jamal Salim, Jamal Mansour, and the other top leaders of the PLO and Hamas, were assassinated. Israel did not hesitate to assassinate somebody who was sending a suicide bomber to kill Israeli children and women.
Did you ever tell Israeli authorities, since you cooperate, they should leave your father alone?
Well, I did not ask for that, and for the things that I did for the state of Israel, let's say for moral obligation. Nothing is written on paper. They kept my father alive. He should have been assassinated 10 times in a row.
But you think because of your cooperation, your father's life was spared?
Yeah. So my father was in a safe house, hiding from the Israeli intelligence, while only the Israeli intelligence knew about his location. For 3 years, like today, if he is listening to this conversation, I tell him, you owe your life to your worst enemies somehow. Because, like many times, the IDF, the Israel, say, intelligence community, we don't share our operations with the army, for example. So the IDF had the idea all the time that Hassan Yousef, my father, is a top terrorist, and they were looking for him from a house to a house. Now the Israeli intelligence would tell the army, okay, you can look everywhere you want, but don't get into this house. We have something going on there. We don't want you to search. Now, the troops would come to the neighborhood, looking for my father, having his picture, investigating people. My father is hearing his name being mentioned by the soldiers outside, many tanks. It's a war zone. He's terrified. He's thinking that he's going to be next. But instead of coming to his place next, they go to the next door, and I come after 3-4 days to meet him, and he's terrified. No food, no water, nothing. And I told him, how did it go? He said, you wouldn't believe what happened. They were searching for me. I heard my name. Everywhere they were looking, and praise Allah, they did not get inside this house. I was like, well, it's not praise Allah, exactly, you know.
It's praise Mosab.
It's praise like Mossad.
So what kind, now for 10 years you cooperated, give us an example of some of the information, the kind of information you gave to the Israeli intelligence.
Well, my job was mostly that the Israeli intelligence had lots of information, but it was very hard to put the information together. One day, if some of you get involved in FBI or CIA, you will understand what I'm talking about. If you have a file that exists of 10,000 pages, and you have one night to make a decision about one person, how can you make a decision? So the Israeli intelligence had lots of information, but unfortunately, they did not understand the culture, the mentality, the dynamics of the society and the organization 100%. So for me, if they just sat down and they gave me some information, I could make sense much easier, much faster. And this is how, was like...
So you were to digest the intelligence, or did you give them actual facts and say, we know a Hamas cell is about to attack a settlement, for example?
But sometimes, we were looking for suicide bombers every day because, a suicide bomber, that was a disaster. This means that somebody is putting explosive on his body, going into a bus where people rushing for their schools, jobs in the morning, and blow himself up, killing himself and killing, 20 other people and injuring 100. We had like dozens of those suicide bombing attacks. Our goal was to go and find this suicide bomber before he starts moving towards his target. That was our goal. Now, how many times we would get lucky to capture one of those? Why? Can I go through the process how they do
Sure.
a suicide bomber? People might think that a suicide bomber means that a terrorist organization has 100 names and all of them are ready with explosives to go. This is not how it goes. Terrorist organizations are very, very sophisticated when it comes to how they do this kind of business. For example, they go to a village and they find a potential terrorist. They ask this terrorist, would you like to become a suicide bomber? It's nighttime. Those guys are wearing masks. The potential suicide bomber did not know their real identity and who they are. If he says yes, they tell him, okay, from now you come with us. In less than 48 hours, he's gone. And if he says no, you tell him, okay, you go home, you don't tell anybody. If you tell anybody, you're going to go to prison for 15 years. So they're left with no choice. Now, many times we carried operations like this, that we go into a village as Israeli intelligence officers or agents. We go undercover and we put a mask. And we see who were the potential suicide bombers. We simply recruit suicide bombers, that before they blow themselves up, they go to prison somehow. That was like part of our deception.
Did you help recruit suicide bombers?
Well, I did not. But, for example, one of the Fatah members came to me and he said, I have 7 suicide bombers. We want to send them all at once in one day. We want to rock the foundations of the state of Israel. And he told me, we don't have enough explosives. Can you secure explosives to us? At that point, I had no choice but to tell him, yes, of course. We'll get you explosives. Because we had to know the location of this house, where they're hiding. And what if he goes somewhere else and gets the explosives, and less than 24 hours, 48 hours, we have 7 suicide bombing attacks. This means like hundreds of people are killed. Now, Israeli intelligence and says like, this is the situation. They're asking for this and that. And we play a game with them, deception, let's say. We had to lie, and we have to lie a lot. We have to make everybody believe, including media, including Israeli army, including Israeli society and Palestinian societies. Now, to put our hands on those potential suicide bombers. Other example, two people came to our house asking for my father. And I said, how can I help you? He's not here. To find out that there were 5 suicide bombers coming from Jordan to volunteer to kill Israelis for the sake of Allah and for the sake of Palestine. Now, in that situation, you have to act very fast. I look at their car, and their car was full of explosives. And I was like, so why are you coming here? They said, because we lost our connection. Our connecting point was arrested by Israel, and our house is not safe anymore. So we're looking for a new safe house, and we need your help. Now, my father is from the political wing of Hamas, not the military wing. And Hamas separates, there is a separation between the military activities and the political activities. People like my father who is involved in politics, they're supposed not to get involved in military activities for security reasons. So the movement can continue away from the Israeli attacks. Now, those guys are standing there. They have a car full of explosives. They're telling me about 3 other suicide bombers that they're waiting somewhere. And if I let them go, this means a big disaster. I told them, guys, here's an idea. The best way to do, I take your car, give me your guns, I give you my personal gun, just for your safety, because they had like rifles, machine guns, like heavy machine guns and all that. I take everything, I put it in a safe place till we find you, your connection again. I give them money, I just got my paycheck from the Israeli intelligence. I give suicide bombers who wants to kill Israelis, Israeli money, and I ask them to go and stay in a safe house where a friend of mine had a room. And then I call the Israeli intelligence and say, what can I do? I couldn't tell the suicide bombers, okay, wait, let me call my Israeli, intelligence people and see what we can do. I had to act fast. Now, where can I put this car full of explosives that could blow up the whole block? In our garage, next to my mother. And I could not ask my mother and my brothers and sisters to leave out of the house at least for a couple of days. And I could not explain to them what's in the car. And if I leave the car outside and the Israeli army come to our house and the Israeli intelligence won't be able to do anything about it. Because how can you convince the public that I was not collaborating with Israel because I had a car full of explosives and I'm not arrested? So anyway, it was a very sensitive and complicated situation. And finally, we put our hands on 5 suicide bombers. Less than a couple of days. We had them in custody, and we had to play a big game like in Son Of Hamas book. There is a chapter we called The Game, that we had a production that is much, much bigger than Hollywood movies. And to convince everybody that I had no affiliation with this arrest, and the blame was on someone else who was one of the suicide bombers.
So what happened in that case? The explosives was in your garage, and what happened?
What we did, the Palestinian Authority at that time was collaborating with the Israeli security, but not fully. I drove the car about a couple of miles down the road, and Israel called the Palestinian Authority and said, we have information about a car that's full of explosives. You have to take care of it. Of course, we had satellite, we had drones, to make sure where the car is going. So the car was gone. Now the terrorists, we simply bugged their house, and we knew what they were talking about, and we waited for the right moment where special forces came undercover and surprised them. One of them, unfortunately, jumped the last minute from the 2nd floor, and he was shot by the Israeli special forces. 4 were arrested. 1 was deported to Jordan, and and his friends still spending a lifetime in Israeli prisons. The guy who was deported to Jordan, that's the guy who took the blame, because his friends thought for a second, how come all of us spending our lives in prison and this guy is going back to Jordan? So all the suspicion went to that guy who was deported to Jordan, which was part of the suicide team that came to the Palestinian territories. So this is like, part of the manipulations, that we had to do. We had no other choice to save human lives, not only Israeli lives, by the way. When we speak of the state of Israel, we have 1.3 million Palestinians, Arabs who live in the state of Israel equally.
Actually, they're not Palestinian Arabs, they're Israeli Arabs.
Well, it's like they consider themselves like in the heart as Palestinians, and they have connections.
Some do and some don't.
And by the way, it's like Israel has no problem with that at all. Israel has no problem. Israel does not discriminate, against any minority or any group of people in Israel. Actually, Arabs who live in Israel, they're the only group that they don't have to serve in the army. While the daughter or the son of the Prime Minister of Israel has to go to the army at the age of 18, the Arab communities in Israel don't have to serve in the army. This is how the state of Israel is tolerant when it comes to Arabs. If you go to ask the Arabs who live in Israel, will you exchange your Israeli citizenships for any Arab citizenship? Believe it or not, none of them will give up their Israeli citizenship.
To buttress your point, when there was talk of giving up some of the neighborhoods in East Jerusalem to a Palestinian state, some of the Palestinian Arab residents would make sure to get Israeli cars so they wouldn't be part of that process.
Right.
So you were 10 years serving Israeli security forces. You were there, you were cooperating, you were helping. How did it come to an end and why?
Well, at some point in my life, again, as a young leader in that region, my reality was completely different than my father and his people. I saw much broader, much bigger picture than the average person or even the intelligent person in that society could see. I saw the Israeli through the Israeli lenses. I saw through the Palestinian lenses. I saw through Hamas member lenses. I saw through Fatah, Islamic Jihad, through the culture, through the religion.
Is there a difference between Fatah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad? Because at the end of the day, don't they want the same thing?
Are you asking if there is a difference between Hamas and Hamas?
As far as what they want goals, as far as Israel is concerned, yes. Yes, I did ask that.
Well, there's a difference.
Actually, one's secular, one's religious. I'm talking about not as far as religious. I'm talking about ideology. At the end of the day, what they want to see in the area that constitutes Israel.
They share lots of hatred towards Israel, and they share lots of misunderstanding towards the state of Israel. And this is why, we published Son of Hamas book in Arabic to encourage Arab new generation to see the reality that I witnessed for. It's very hard to bring somebody from that community and have them believe in what I believe today. Why? Because I have totally different experience. Talking about the world of deception, you know how many games we had to play on a daily basis to fool media, to fool armies, to fool the entire society? On a daily basis, that was our game. And with that said, I understand the difference between a lie and the truth very, very well. This is what I was trained to do. And in that society, unfortunately, when you see an entire nation falling for a lie or believing in lies, shadows of images. Socrates, in his allegory of the cave, describes a bunch of prisoners. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with that. And they're looking at shadows of images, and they think it's reality. Socrates says to them, the truth is no more than shadows of images. Now, when you're living in a society, even you can see this here in the United States, how many people, they have perceptions of gods or politics, and they're totally lying to themselves, and they're living in a fantasy. It's not reality. And now, when you're living in a community like that community, and you understand the level of deception, that the society deceives itself, you have to do something about it. At some point, I could not keep going. It was very hard for me.
It was hard for you to live with the deceptions, and you're living a lie to your family, to your community, because you're serving Israel, but living within the community. So did it get to you finally? You said, I can't do it anymore?
Well, honestly, I was not, somehow I was alive, but I was on the side of the truth. You know, and I was witnessing a society that is living a much, much bigger life. And I had to do something about it. You know, for me, it's not that I could not only on the personal level, it became very hard at some point, but for me, I became paralyzed. I couldn't do anymore.
And you said you want out? You said the Israeli handlers, I can't do it anymore? Is that what happened?
Yes, at some point in 2006, I decided to move on in my life, and finally I got the approval from the agency to leave.
You know, you see in the movies, you see James Bond. Once you're a member of Secret Service, you're always a member. Are you still a member?
No, I'm not a member. Still, actually, if I was a member, I wouldn't be speaking really like this.
Is this part of the deception you're telling us, or?
You know, no, it's not part. Like, you know, for example, like the FBI, you know, they came after, you know, my story came out. It's like, oh gosh, like you'd have been like an amazing asset for us. You know, if you did not expose yourself. Once somebody exposed themselves, you know, they're useless, you can say. Like today, I can maybe help with analyzing things. You know, I still have some knowledge, but I'm definitely not a candidate for this kind of job anymore. I doubt that one day any intelligence service will hire me.
We're going to take a break to get some more of your questions. So let's proceed.
I see everybody like either like bored, extremely bored, or like maybe they're not interested at all in what I have to say.
I think we have some
We
good
need to see
questions
some
coming up,
movement,
right?
We have a lot of interesting questions.
People
Interesting.
yawning and
People keep texting lots of questions. How about the so-called Arab Spring?
what was it?
The Arab Spring. How do you feel about the Arab Spring?
Okay, I tell you about the Arab Spring. By the way, I just noticed like among us, I'm assuming a Muslim girl. Can we please like put our hands together like for her, please? I tell you why. Because she knows that I'm controversial. She knows, I'm sure, you know, my stand against Islam. And many people understand that. And they say we don't want to be affiliated by that because it also brings shame on them. They might be in awkward position with their families or their friends. Why would you attend an event like this? You know, for example, let's say if you heard about a terrorist event, okay, and there is a terrorist talking, and he says like, I want to go, or like a criminal, or like a mafia member, let's say. You know, nobody would go to events like this. For Muslims, they see me as a traitor. For Muslims, they don't see me as a hero. They don't see me as a person who learned how to think for himself. They don't see me as just a normal person trying to choose, you know, things for his life and demonstrate his freedoms. They don't see it that way. So thank you so much for being here. And I hope that, you know, my words are finding a way to your heart, to your mind. You don't have to believe exactly in what I believe, but please to think for yourself. Please to demonstrate these freedoms that we have. Now, regarding to
Arab Spring.
the Arab Spring. Arab Spring, I tell you when it's a spring. It's a spring when Arabs are fighting against the absolute control of religion. This is when we can call it spring. When we look back at the European spring, it was against the absolute control of the church over people's lives, where they persecuted and killed scientists. And this is, you know, where the Dark Ages came. So finally, you know, the revolution liberated people from the absolute control of religion, and for that we call it the European Spring. Now in the Arab world, it's totally the opposite. I'm sorry to say this. It's a little negative way to see things, but what's happening, instead of fighting against the absolute control of religion, they're fighting against political systems, so they brought a political system down. Another religious system now is in control to praise more religion. And I don't see spring in this. I see winter, I see fall. I don't see spring. And I hope at some point, as we sow new generation demonstrating against authorities, you see them as well demonstrating against false gods, against bad belief systems. This is when it's going to be spread.
Another question. How justified is Israel in bombing Gaza seemingly whenever they see fit?
Well, that's not true. That's not true. Israel has nuclear bombs, for example. Why don't they nuke Gaza tomorrow in the morning and just let's move on? Israel has the power to wipe and force the Palestinians out of that land if they want to. The problem when Hamas people and extremists launch their missiles from very populated areas. Gaza Strip is the most populated area on the face of Earth. Very small, tiny area has 1.5 million population. It's much smaller than your town that we live in here. Now, for the Israelis, if somebody is launching a missile that is putting 2/3 of population of the state of Israel in shelters, Israel has to defend itself. And now I think the fault is not the fault of the state of Israel, it's the fault of the people and the fault of terrorists who launched the missiles from among children. I'm not here to promote for Israel. I don't work for the state of Israel anymore. But the truth is a very important factor on our way to achieve real peace. If you don't understand the reality as is, everybody has a story. And my heart breaks, for the children who are dying in Gaza. This is why, the last time, what happened in, Gazans rained Israel with missiles. And Israel could not react because of the Palestinian population. And how far terrorists are going to take this, in an attempt to destroy the state of Israel, using children and women as a shelter. So these are the things, the difference between, this enemy and that enemy. It's a brutal one.
How strong is Hamas today, and who is financially backing them?
Hamas is a very independent movement. Hamas, if it's not supported financially by Iran, let's say, and other regimes, they pay from their own pocket because their strength is in their ideology. And when you hear me criticizing the religion itself and questioning it, because I understand, without the religion, Hamas is a very weak organization and it cannot continue. The foundation of Hamas is Islam. The foundation of the Muslim Brotherhood is Islam. If we allow people to question Islam, I'm not saying to go against it. Just I would love to see the freedom in the Middle East, in the Arab and Muslim worlds, that people can question and ask about the Prophet, about the Quran, and discuss things freely without being afraid to be persecuted. That's the goal. And hopefully, we will see this happening. And once this happens, terrorist organizations won't be able to deceive people anymore. Because you think, what motives a suicide bomber? Money? He's going to die anyway. What he's going to do with the money? You cannot, but maybe a false promise of 70 virgins. It's like if he's single, if he's there's no sex life in that community, it sounds like good, just like escape life, quit life, easy. It's not going to feel anything. This is how they convince him, brainwash him. And you're going to Allah. Allah is going to take care of you. That's it. You're going to be in paradise. So this is a way of escape for people. Now, if there was no Allah in the picture, if there was no belief system in the picture, if people knew how to doubt, how to think for themselves, how can you recruit a suicide bomber in that community? It would be much more difficult mission for anybody to do. This is why I go back always to the belief system and try to discuss it to discuss the problem from its roots.
Does Hamas have a relationship with any other terrorist organization?
Allah and Hamas are in a competition, believe it or not. They don't like each other. Because Hezbollah is a Shia and Hamas is a Sunni organization. What brings them together? Their hatred for the state of Israel. Let's imagine, hopefully this does not happen, but let's imagine that Israel is not in the picture. Believe it or not, Hamas will fight Hezbollah and Hezbollah will fight Hamas. What's bringing all these organizations together is a common enemy. And that's what keeps them or help them continue pushing their religious and political agenda.
What is your opinion of Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority?
Well, unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority, which is supposed to be a peace partner, supposedly, if I go back today to Ramallah or to the Palestinian territories, I will be executed by the Palestinian Authority. Now, some people choose to believe that Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority is a true peace partner. And I don't want to kill the hope in their minds and in their hearts. Actually, I want to encourage that. But I personally don't believe that there is a true peacemaker on the other side that has the courage and the influence to make the change yet. The average person, they want to live their life, I believe. They want to just make a living. They want to live a peaceful life. I believe in that. I have no doubt. But we don't have the core group, the group who is willing, if necessary, to suffer and die for the sake of peace. And when I start to see a group of people like this coming from the Arab-Palestinian side, I will be more hopeful.
What is your view on the expansion of Israeli settlements in Judea and Samaria?
What was that?
The settlements in Judea and Samaria, how do you feel about their expansions?
Well, we call them settlements now because they're considered by the United Nations as settlements. But honestly, it's like we're talking about modern towns. We're talking about cities of 200,000 people in each one. Arabs, over 6 decades ago, when they were offered to take the West Bank, where are the settlements right now, they said no. We want to come in, we want to throw Israel and the Israeli nation in the sea. And they were saying on the radio stations, asking the fish of the sea to get hungry. Because this is what they're about to do, to make the Jewish nation a bait or a food for the fish of the sea. This is how Arabs were thinking 60 years ago. The Arab troops came in, all unified, against the newborn state of Israel that did not have enough army or arms or any of that. And they lost the war against Israel. As a result of that war, Israel had to make a security belt in the West Bank, Golan Heights, Sinai, and the Gaza Strip. Now look what Israel did. When Mahmoud al-Sadat or Muhammad al-Sadat came to Israel with good intention for peace, for the first time as a leader from Arab countries. Every country wanted to destroy Israel, including Egypt. But here is the Egyptian president coming to the Israeli parliament with real intention for peace. Israel, based on that, they did not touch your land. Here is the fence and here is your land. How can you explain the other land was taken? You know why? Because the people sold their land to the Israelis. But in secret, they did not tell public because they would be persecuted and even killed if they sold a land to Israel. So simply, I don't think that, first of all, Israel did not steal this land. Israel bought that land. I don't want to go into now the ideological dimension of all this. Let's put it on the side. There is a reality today, and there are population who live in that land. And what would be the solution? Let's drove people out of their houses, where they grew up, where they were born. That's not a good solution. I think the best solution would be for people to coexist with each other. And Palestinians want to show, good intention. They can show this in many, many ways.
How accurate accurate is the media portrayal of the events that occur in Israel? How accurate is the media portrayal of the events that transpire in Israel?
Well, first thing, don't believe anything that you see on media. I'm not saying that the media is saying wrong things, but as part of our work in the intelligence and the work of deception, you know how many times we used media to say what we wanted them to say? So the public believed. We did that on daily basis. We created scenarios that they were perfect lies, that the media were like the first to fall for these lies. So now it's like, I don't know how accurate the media is of representing, you know, the situation. And this is not a Middle Eastern problem, or it's a universal problem, in my opinion. At the end of the day, all of us need to learn how to think for ourselves and how to weigh the events that happen in life and make sense of what we see.
But the question that I have for you is Hamas winning the propaganda war against Israel because their narrative is taking hold, especially in Europe and even certain parts of the United States on Western television?
Well, you know, many people are believing in the lies of Hamas, especially, you know, when there are children's blood involved. You know, how can you convince, if you as American student, if you took a trip to Gaza Strip and you see the life, how Palestinians live in refugee camps, just the daily life, you're going to find 20 people living in one room, like your bedroom, that they have your privacy, where you learn your independence. This is how bad it is. You will see no infrastructure. You will see the wastewater just on the streets. You know, people don't have anything in that region, especially the Gaza Strip. And also to see bombs coming from the skies, you know, without looking at the grand picture and the dynamics of politics and intelligence and what's really happening. You know, you are going to hate Israel too. You're going to have a different opinion of Israel, as the Palestinians of Gaza Strip have a different opinion of Israel. So the reality is very difficult on the ground. It's very complicated. It's not black and white. It all falls actually in gray areas. This is why I insist on just focusing on the truth as a way of this endless circle of life.
We're coming to the end, and I wanted to close out with a question I asked you in the beginning, because you mentioned the brutality of Hamas, where they take a collaborator, a suspected collaborator, they kill him. You saw that in prison. We see that even today in Palestinian society, where somebody suspected of being a collaborator, they get killed. So I'm curious to know why do you believe there weren't any attempts to get to you, because you are collaborator supreme excellence?
Well, at that time, you know,
even now, because they're not forgiving. The Hamas people are not forgiving people. You know that.
Well, first of all, thank God, you know, for being,
Thank God for that.
Yeah, for being in this country, you know, where we don't have to be afraid. You know,
But the terrorist in this country, Rabbi Meir Kahane, founder of the Militant Jewish Defense League,
Right.
was killed in the 1991 by Al-Qaeda in the United States. We saw the World Trade Center bombing in 1993 in New York. There are terrorist incidents. There are Hamas cells, there are Hezbollah cells in the United States. We know that. So I'm just curious to know, and I thank God that nothing happened, but I'm just curious to know why they didn't even try.
First of all, I choose to live free. You know, my entire journey was not to shift, you know, political and religious agendas, to leave Islam and become Christian. Religion is religion. For me, it's a journey of freedom. It's a journey of freedom, and today I'm not willing to give up my freedom, you know, for intimidation or for fear. Also, these like other forms of slavery. And for me, as a freedom fighter, you know, fought my entire life, you know, against forces of darkness. It doesn't matter like their form, what their form is. It doesn't matter if they were visible or they were invisible. I am not willing to lose my freedom today because of intimidation. Nobody can take
No,
this
my
away.
question, not so
So it's
much
like
about
simply-
your freedom, is why didn't they even try? Thank God they haven't, but why?
So this is, if this is how I live every day, trust me, they know it. Second, I don't put my, you know, residential addresses or my, where I go publicly. My circles are very
So you did take precautions?
Definitely, like naturally, without, it's like exaggeration, without, making it a big deal. I'm living my life normally. I choose to be this way, and I encourage everyone to live this way. We don't know. Sometimes, I'm riding my bicycle, and I'm going like 35 miles per hour, and I could crash and die. That's like more scary to me than a terrorist coming and doing something. So why not to stand for the truth, to think for ourselves, to stand for our freedoms, and live free instead of living a slave for intimidation and fear.
Big hand. He's courageous. You've been a great audience, and we'd love to see you on the radio with broadlinecommunications.com, and we're covering these kinds of issues on a regular basis, and we'd love to see you on the radio, see you on TV. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Peace to you all.
Thank you very much, Mosab and Zev. We'd like to invite to the stage representatives from the three sponsoring organizations. We have Avi up here. I'd like to invite Ava from Hillel and Kyle from API. Please come up to present Mosab and Mr. Brenner with